lots of the variations you see on spacetypegenerator.com are mistakes, where I accidentally put the wrong sine wave in the wrong variable and like something exploded. And then it was like, oh man, that could be a whole new investigation.
Oh, Christ. Kiel Mutschelknaus is a true multidisciplinary artist. He's a graphic designer, he's an illustrator, an animator, a typographer, and most recently, he is a coder. He was born and raised in South Dakota and moved to Detroit to earn his MFA 2D design from the Cranbrook Academy of Art. After Cranbrook, he moved to DC, where he's now an instructor at MICA, the world-renowned College of Art and Design. And in recent years, Kiel's received some well-earned acclaim for his space type generator project, which is which I don't totally understand. So we're gonna like get into that. But it's I think like a series of websites that allows users to create kind of infinitely customizable animated type. And of course, we can't forget that before Cranbrook and before MICA and before the space type generator, Kiel was a designer at Fresh Produce, where he is still held in very high regard. So Kiel, thank you and for being here and welcome. And and let's explain this space type generator.
Yeah, all right, cool. Thank you. Yeah, that's all. I hold Fresh Produce in very high regard. It feels still like home, even though it's a while ago that I was there. Yeah, space type generator. I can give you a rundown of that. It's a website I created. I was kind of trying to teach myself how to code. So it's written in JavaScript using the P5.js library, which is meant to kind of replicate the functionality and interaction of processing, which is kind of like a really user-friendly, which is a very user-friendly way to code for like designers to code. And for me, it's like a very kind of visual representation, which is kind of very helpful was very helpful to me when I was trying to learn. So lots of these were kind of like based off of some thoughts about kinetic typography, and then just playing around with lots of sine waves and code. And then it was really kind of satisfying to work in. So there's tons of variations, and I haven't posted a new variation in quite a while, but I continue to kind of work with space type generator in mind in terms of creating graphics that are emotions that are primarily created through coding and loops and waves and stuff like that. But the genesis of space type was I was creating some work inside of After Effects for some students at MICA. We were doing I think it was advanced motion graphics or some class, and we were doing some motion trackings. And so I kind of decided to set some typography in a space to make it look like augmented reality. And then from there, I kind of just kept playing with it, kept tinkering, and there's this really great spot inside of After Effects where you can plug in bits of code to kind of make the layers and objects move in specific ways. And that's like kind of started to blur the lines between code, but After Effects got like really glitchy. I think I was pushing it a little bit too hard. And so eventually I just kind of transferred it all to code. And then I was able to kind of interact with the forms I was making in real time with sliders. And it really kind of blew everything open. It was really kind of illuminating me to kind of get rid of some of the software and kind of build your own tools and customization. So
the sort of the move towards that feels sort of indicative of what you've done sort of throughout your creative career, like where it always seems like you're sort of building, and motion has become kind of integrated into your work more and more over time. Is that true? And so do you feel like this is sort of is this like the Mutschelknaus? So is this your final form, like where you've stopped using software and now you're just straight code?
Yeah,
like,
I'm on the other side of the matrix. Yeah. I'm on the other side. I don't know. I mean, the coding stuff I still just need to learn a lot more about. I kind of feel like it's one trick just done and remixed in like a variety of different ways. And I feel like it's kind of gotten away from me. I always relate it to like ship of Theseus, you know, like where you have a ship and then you start replacing parts of it with other parts, and pretty soon it's not like the same ship anymore. And that's like a little bit what space type generators become, is like where I've taken one thing and then like taken off parts, put new parts in. So it's gotten really messy, and I feel like I've kind of forgotten some of the foundational, or I haven't ever really learned some of the foundational things about basic interaction with code. So I think space type like looks kind of really exciting, but it's kind of one trick over and over again. This isn't, you aren't going to post this, are you?
Why a generator? You know, I think there's like, being in the digital space, there's this openness and open source nature to things. Is that something that you're drawn to, like just from the generator? That's something that I feel through your work.
Yeah, definitely. I think like some of those tools that I was dealing with early on, you know, fresh produce in grad school, and still today, I feel like I kind of have almost a mastery over, you know, like those tools don't really surprise me anymore. So being able to like edit those tools and not only like use tools, but manipulate parameters within those tools to do things that are either automated or pushing boundaries is a way to kind of surprise me, you know, in a sense. So there's like several layers of surprise when you're coding. There's like mistakes that I make all the time, basically, that kind of surprise me. Like lots of the variations you see on spacetypegenerator.com are mistakes, you know, where I accidentally put the wrong sine wave in the wrong variable and like something exploded, and then it was like, oh man, that could be a whole new investigation. And so that's like one layer of the investigation, is actually building these generators and these systems, and then the actual manipulating the sliders and tweaking them and figuring out different sorts of combinations of those sliders has been a way to added another layer of surprise. And then seeing people use it, you know, is super exciting. There've been several tons of designers that have worked with it that have like totally surprised me, that like I would not have considered manipulating it in such a way. And it's been really satisfying. You know, I feel like I have an intimate knowledge of the tools of these generators, but then like somebody will kind of stretch some of the variables or some of the sliders in such a way that they kind of break apart, and the way they're combining them with like kind of a design, their own kind of aesthetic and their own approach has been really satisfying and really exciting.
Do you get the same feeling when you're working with code as like when you're working on a 2D piece? Is there a difference between creating, you know, a more traditional piece of art and producing code?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, for me, like I feel so comfortable in like Illustrator or even After Effects to some extent, that like I feel like if I kind of know what I need to build or what I need to illustrate, I can just like, you know, kind of go straight there, and I'm able to like lay out pretty effortlessly what's in my mind. But with code, I will like, you know, just stare at the screen for 15 minutes, like just trying to think about how to solve a math problem, or it'll like follow me for days after that. Like if I'm trying to figure out like, how can I make this one letter like rotate based on what's above and behind it in 3D space, you know, like what order do the angles of X, Y, and Z need to rotate in to give me like the correct combination of space. And like some of those things will just drive me nuts for days, and I will just be thinking about them all the time. So we were just talking about those webinars, but for students, I was doing some streaming of work, you know, like as I was just to kind of like replicate the feeling of working in a studio with students. And once I would switch over to code, it just got like so much more boring, because it was basically me just like staring at the screen, just like trying to think about what to do, because sometimes there's like some code that it's just beyond me. You know, it's like I'm not skillful enough, or I've forgotten enough of my basic trigonometry that like it's totally escaping me. What was it? I was trying to, oh yeah, I've been working with these ribbons and these stripes, and there was like, I wanted it to look, or I wanted to rotate like a piece of the stripe along like a pendulum sort of thing. And I still can't figure it out. One day I will, but you know, it takes a lot more like internal time, mental time for me to figure out some of the coding stuff for sure.
Kyle, I think you mentioned to Liz something about just your trajectory, and also like from fresh produce to grad school and not knowing what graphic design was. What has changed in your perspective? Is your understanding of graphic design so much like broader and wider than you thought it was in the beginning?
Yeah, well, I don't think I really got a good grasp of traditional graphic design until I started teaching at MICA, which is kind of a scary thing to say, and I hope my chair doesn't hear that, but I really think that I like some of the kind of foundational skills like was totally absent from my experiences, and you know, fresh produce, it was like it's already kind of a wild place to work in a not traditional space. And my undergrad was a BA in studio art, you know, so we didn't really have a typography course or things like that. So there are lots of lessons that like I got very far in my career or young career, like kind of not really understanding or not really having an appreciation for. Maybe that's what it was. Like, you know, I think when I was at Fresh Produce, like my understanding of what good graphic design was like, is there a really cool illustration with it? And, you know, Ted didn't say no to that sort of approach. So like lots of that stuff, it was just like, what's a cool illustration I can accompany this with? And I mean, like that was really exciting at the time. I kind of go back and forth on like how productive it was. Like if I had had a design mentor there, would my trajectory be different? And you know, like there were tons of designers that came into Fresh Produce, or that Fresh Produce would like interact with, that like kind of gave me a glimpse of a working seasoned professional. But so that was kind of missing. And then Cranbrook Academy of Art is a institution where lots of those barriers of discipline are kind of like shunned and pushed away. And so like everybody's doing everything. And again, traditional kind of graphic design skills and typography is like pushed to the limit and explored in ways in which legibility is like, you know, for the birds. So like, who cares if it's illegible? Like what else can you like do with that, and how can you push some of those boundaries? And then, you know, working at MICA, I got kind of more exposed to good typography and good design. And not to say like every other place was full of like bad design. We did lots of exciting work at Fresh Produce and at Cranbrook, but like some of those like traditional foundational lessons were just kind of absent, I think, in my trajectory.
Before, like way before the space type generator, you've always seemed to incorporate a lot of language into your work, like written language. Can you talk a little bit about that? Like for a visual artist, you use words quite a bit.
Yeah, I think that's part of like making with typography, right? Like it needs to say something. So I feel a little bit like a tourist to writing. I don't feel like it's lots of the type is like really profound or anything. Lots of the type is, I guess, earlier was very illustrative, you know, like kind of it coming in the form of whatever it was saying, which is like an okay exercise to do, but there's so much kind of potential there lost with you know, what something can look like versus what it in English says, you know, and that kind of can create some like really exciting things, which is something that was explored a lot in Cranbrook. And it's like we kind of talked about how much of a responsibility that was to have something say something, but then say it in an interesting way and kind of play around with language and stuff that way. Yeah, I always feel like sometimes I'm just going through a thesaurus trying to find interesting combinations of letters or words or something, or trying to find somebody else who's been saying brilliant things. So I have been like reading more poetry in a sense. But again, that kind of feels like just an excuse to use letters and words, right? I need to work with more writers to write more interesting things for me, Brian, you know.
I've been seeing some of those like newer renditions of the movements. How do those, like in your head, how does it grow? Does it grow from a mistake, or does it grow from like a very voluntary action of what's the next step in this?
Yeah, that's great. I've been, yeah, initially a lot of them were mistakes, but then more recently there've been kind of new techniques with the coding that I've been exploring. Whether it's been like stretching images off onto structures that I'm creating in 2D or 3D space. And that's kind of been really exciting to figure out how some of those new lessons can be remixed with old lessons. So some of those I kind of reference as remixes, because it's like taking something I know now or I feel more comfortable working with now, or something from one generator and revisiting something that I worked with earlier in a different generator. Other ones are inspired by design pieces I see. You know, like this ribbon one came from like these cool posters I was seeing where it was like physical ribbon that was like stacked on top of each other. And I was like, I wonder if we could do that like with code. Could I generate something like that? And so then that's kind of where it started. And I started to think about like having an origin point, and then like could the ribbon like rotate around it? And then as it was rotating around, could it like move up in space and also rotate in all these different directions? And instead of figuring that out, I like found some like wild paper on proton cages, which I still don't know what they are, but it came with a formula that was a ribbon wrapped around a sphere. And so then I just like plugged that in and manipulated some of the code, and then stretched some graphics I had drawn elsewhere in the code, and it created this really cool thing. And now that's like actually been super exciting. Can I show you something?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just working with Dayan Chung, who's another designer at a teacher at MICA, and we created a generator. Well, just kind of like a fancy site for students that are leaving, since this is such a weird time.
Aww.
We've created like kind of a message, and they can actually interact with it and plug in. This is such a nerdy thing, but their favorite hex codes, their favorite colors, so that they can generate they can help dictate what the color of the confetti is in this generator. You know, you're talking about like where some of these ideas start. And this one started with this kind of long streaming thing, but then I figured out like if we cut up the streamers, then could it branch into confetti? Ooh, yeah, so it's now even like more colorful than it used to be.
So the students are adding those confetti colors?
Yeah, they're adding, there's like a Google form down here. I've already done it, but when you click on it, yeah, you can add your favorite hex code, and then that will generate the color of the confetti. And it'll like randomly select 10 of the colors. And then we're also, faculty is like writing some of these messages on these strings. Oh yeah, finish strong. That's like a new one. We did it. Oh, cool. So they're like swapping out some of these messages in real time. So anyway, like this one has its genesis in, I can maybe show you like some of like the actual code of what this was. You know, it started as these sort of things, which are like kind of constantly moving, but like what the current version of it is like those same sort of things, but it's just like strips of it. It's just kind of like sections of it get rendered. So you see some of the same patterns, but it's kind of like a fun way in which like some of these eventually evolve into other forms, which I think are also pretty exciting. Oh yeah, this has some cool colors in it. Okay, I'll stop sharing.
What do you think the next iteration of your work is? What do you have planned? Like, what do you think is?
I don't know. I have lots of, I mean, like there's not a lot of good output functionality of space type generator, which I like get messages about kind of on a daily basis about like, how can we save this out? You know, how can you like actually get something to use, you know, out of it? And I don't know, you can't really, it's really hard. I've explored a number of avenues and none of it has really worked. So I don't know, like figuring out like a tool that isn't kind of just a novelty thing. So I don't know if that means like exploring an app of it or something, or going to a space where it's easier to output some of the functionality of it. I would also like to like launch another generator. It's been a while since I've actually created one you could interact with. Some of the ones I'm playing with now kind of get like so bespoke and specific for like whatever I want to do with it, that like I don't think they're that fun to experiment with or play with. So I do want to try and figure out one that I can launch to like kind of keep people excited about it. So I'd like to make some more variations, but I'd also like to figure out like another form it could take that would get it out of the browser and into, After Effects or Premiere or production level software.
It's kind of interesting too, the idea of it just being a temporary, piece of work. Like there's, I think there is value in something not being necessarily productive,
Yeah, especially these days, right? Like when
Yeah.
we're trying to find some distraction. But I totally get that. Like I've had lots of people comment about how like you can just lose yourselves in fiddling with all of the parameters. And I totally agree with that. For me, these like came out of a desire to like make tools where I could iterate faster and explore forms faster. And so, it is kind of maybe more for me and less for an end user to like actually use on a production level.
Yeah, and you've shared a couple of designers or groups of studios who have used the space type generator to create murals that are AR to a poster that has an AR element, and I think that still stems from your practice. You're seeing how you've used it and how it's grown. So that's really exciting for me, where there is still some sort of shared ownership in your work. But yeah, that's been cool. Have you dug deeper into AR? Some of those earlier things that you were doing on campus?
Yeah. I have played around with Spark AR, which is Instagram and Facebook's AR tool, and I did like a quick experiment with that, and like that's like super exciting. I mean, there's something so wild about just downloading Spark AR on your computer and then opening it up and it's like tracking your face immediately. I mean, it's a little terrifying, but it's also like super exciting, the potential there. I mean, that's another place I'd like to explore a little bit more. The Spark AR though, like because of this COVID situation, their publishing aspect, like you like can create something in it, but then actually publish it to your profile, they've suspended that for the time being. I just think because of I don't know, access to manpower or something, but so that's been put on hold. But that whole world is really exciting. I think there's still a few barriers to entry, in terms of like you have to look through a screen to experience the AR, so then you need the correct app, and having them on like social media apps like Instagram or Facebook or Snapchat, like that makes that barrier so much lower. So I think there will definitely be kind of like more progress in that field. But yeah, now knowing what I know now and like kind of some more familiarity with coding and stuff, it'd be definitely fun to return to that realm and kind of see what can be done with that. But then again, it's like has to run on a phone if it is like kind of the basic code rather than somebody else's platform. So I don't know, there's so many things I have to learn still. But as of yesterday, I'm on sabbatical, so like I've got some time now, I think, to learn those, fill all those holes. I've been saying everybody like, oh, I'll do it during sabbatical. So it's gonna be a pretty busy sabbatical, I think.
Well, I know we're coming up on the end of our time, but Angela, anything else?
No, I think I'm good on my end.
Okay. Kyle, anything you want to talk about that we didn't talk about?
No, I'm good. Thanks for chatting. This is really exciting.